welcome to the Y Intervention Podcast. I am your host, Christopher Doyle. Today I am joined by Kevin Parker. He is the CEO, owner of TrueWarriorSuccess.com. Him and I met probably, say 2 years ago now. And back then, both of us were on a very similar trajectory, so we hit it off right away. And so now I'm glad that we've reconnected and we've both come far on our journey, and we're going to talk about that a little bit, I'm sure. But Kevin, how's it going?
It's great. It's a pleasure to be on your show. It's good to see you again. That's always a pleasure. I'm really looking forward to diving into this topic.
All right. So you and I both have struggled with addiction in our own way, in our own path. And so why don't we just go back to the beginning for you of kind of what got you started there, whatever your background was with your drug or alcohol use in the past.
Well, I was an addict in every sense of the word. I was addicted to filling a void in my heart. As a young kid, I was physically, mentally, and emotionally abused by an older step-sibling, and it really got to me. And I always didn't feel very comfortable in my own skin. I never felt like enough. So I always wanted to compensate in this factor, whether it had been weed or alcohol or pills or cocaine or heroin or pornography or sex, whatever it was. I was just a full-blown addict when it come to filling this void that I just never had enough. And I started smoking marijuana when I was in about 7th grade, and I really didn't become a serious problem until I was halfway through high school. And then I just started dabbling with everything from cocaine to ecstasy. And for a while I was playing sports, so I sold drugs just to keep up with my habit. Immediately after high school, I got into a head-on collision with a bus. And that was really when everything kind of got out of hand, because I was introduced to painkillers. Once that happened, I went to the doctor. They prescribed me painkillers, and it was so easy to get them. And I was already an addict at that point. So now I was getting them legally prescribed by the doctors. And I thought it was even better and even more okay. And I never realized how addictive they were. And I would stack opioids with cocaine and other drugs like ecstasy and really whatever I can get my hands on, Xanax. And I lost everything. Every girlfriend I ever had, every family member that really was like by my side, every friend, every opportunity, every job, everything just kind of fell apart before I even knew it. And then I just turned around and I had nothing left. I lost my career. I lost my apartment. I ended up moving back with my father, and he took me in for a few months. He's seen how bad I was getting, and he looked at me one day. He's like, "Kevin, you're a full-blown junkie." And he showed me a video of me. And I was like, "Are you out of your mind? I'm just tired. That's nothing." This went on for a few months, and they tried to stage an intervention. It wasn't a professional intervention. They weren't very well educated on the topic.
Okay, so let's put a hold right there. We're definitely going to come back to that. Okay. So because we definitely opened up a whole lot there. We covered a lot of ground. You mentioned, like as soon as you got the prescription from a doctor, you felt like it was okay. And prior to that, was there anything rattling around in your brain, like through high school, like where you said to yourself, "This is a problem," or was it always okay for you?
I knew it was a problem when I was doing cocaine all night, and I realized that I couldn't stop. But I always thought I had a handle on it, because it's not like I did cocaine every single day. But once I did it, I just couldn't stop. I was a give me drug.
Yeah.
And I felt like I didn't think marijuana or alcohol was really a problem, because I wasn't dependent on it in the sense that I would get sick or freak out if I didn't have it. I just liked to do it a lot, and I didn't really see it as a bad thing. And I recreationally did ecstasy and cocaine on the weekends. So I was young and immature at 18 years old. I didn't really see a problem with it.
Okay. So you never really tried to stop in any sort of sense. It was just like, we're having a fun time. I'm young, and there was no issues until you had a head-on collision with a bus.
Correct.
Okay. And so you get prescription painkillers. And so now take us through, like, in that period, what did that look like for you at that time?
So this was 2005. I had a herniated disc in my back, sciatica, scoliosis, and I was just in a lot of pain. So when I went to the doctor, they quickly prescribed me 5 milligram oxycodone. and I would take them 4 times a day. And within a month or two, they prescribed it to 7.5 and then 10 milligrams and 15. And before I knew it, I was taking 30 milligram oxycordones. And by this time, I was completely hooked, and I had a union job. I dropped out of college because I just was taking them every day and I couldn't sit still in class. So I got a union job doing heavy concrete laboring for the union, building high rises. I couldn't get out of bed unless I took 2 30 milligram oxys. And periodically, every 2 to 3 hours, I would take another pill. It got to the point where the doctors cut me off and I had to go to the streets. And I was spending $700, $800, $900 a week just in my habit, just so I can afford the pills, just so I can go to work, just so I can afford my pills.
Yeah.
So it became a vicious cycle, and I was just completely trapped at that point.
What was the time frame between the accident and when it got from the pills to heroin?
Well, I always made money, so a lot of the time it was strictly 30s and 80 milligram oxycodone. But when I could not find them, I would get heroin. But I always had money on me. So most of the time, I would say about 85, 90% of the time I was getting pills. But when I couldn't find them, I easily just went to heroin because it was a lot cheaper and it was a lot more acceptable. Now, you got to understand, now it's a lot harder to get pills. They're $25, $30 for a pill. I was getting 30 milligrams for $10 a pill, which is a third of what people pay now. So, right. And I had a really high paying job, so I was able to afford it. But it's the same exact thing. Opioids is, whether you're taking pills or heroin, it's the same exact thing. Whether you're sniffing them, taking them, or shooting them, it's just a different way to administer. Right.
And that's certainly an important thing to point out for family members, that the action of opiates, whether it's painkillers prescribed by a doctor or if it's heroin off the street, it's the same mechanism in the brain.
Absolutely. Same exact thing, just more potent, obviously, when you shoot it intravenous. And now they have fentanyl, which is very dangerous.
Right.
Which is scary.
Yeah. Then your family attempts an intervention at some point. And so was that, so you mentioned 2005, like how long was the vicious cycle going on for you before they attempted an intervention?
About 6 years. It happened in 2011. Oh. November of 2011.
So 5 years of just vicious physical dependence, need, can't get off it, and day in, day out, this is what we're doing.
Correct.
That's just rough.
Yeah. Seemed like a lot longer than that when I was going through it, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, of course. So now this is interesting. So we're going to come into now what, this might be, we could call this like what not to do for an intervention, right? So your family, they come in and they try to stage this intervention. And so what happens?
So up until this point, my family were all a bunch of enablers. They gave me money when I needed it. They helped me make my own excuses when I said that I was tired or sick. They kind of went with it. My girlfriend was a huge enabler at the time. But at this one specific day, with no warning at all, they bombarded me with no professional help at all. My mother, my father, my stepmother, they all ran into my room and started yelling at me like, you got to get out of bed right now. You got to go to a program right now. Okay. And I was like wiping sleep out of my eyes, and I was laying there with my girl half naked, and I was aggravated that they just walked into my room. I'm sitting there with my girlfriend. I'm sitting there, and they're not even explaining to me how it affected them. They're pointing their finger and they're saying, this is you. They're not speaking from a point of how it affected them. They're just accusing me of all these things. So immediately, what happens when people start pointing fingers at you, you get defensive. Mm-hmm. And they started saying, you have to do this, you have to do that, blah, blah, blah. And I got really mad, and I really got really defensive. Mm-hmm. I was like, I don't need any help. I don't need anything that you're saying. I'm good. I'm doing it without you. And they gave me an ultimatum without even performing any kind of leverage. They were just like, well, either you're going to go right this second or you got to get out of the house. And I just looked at them. I told them off. I picked up my safe. I put it on my shoulders, and I stormed out the house in the middle of November in a tank top and shorts. And I walked about a half a mile to my friend's house. I must look like a psycho storming down the street with a safe on my shoulders. And like any addict, I manipulated my best friend's mom, telling them that my family hates me, that they kick me out, they don't love me.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, it's okay, you can stay here as long as you want,
Yeah.
because that's how addicts survive, is through manipulation. And
Right.
I was pretty good at it at that
Yeah.
point.
And you mentioned your family enabling you in different ways. So what did some of those ways look like specifically? And of course, why do you think that they did that?
Your family wants to see the benefit of the doubt, because obviously they love you. They don't want to think the worst of you. So they've known you since you were a little kid, or a baby for that matter, and they see you as this little baby, or this son, or this brother or daughter, or whatever that might be, before you did drugs, and they try to see the best in you. So when you start giving them even a sliver of a BS story, they want to grab onto it. They want to believe it. And it's very, very hard to see the forest for the trees when you're so close to something like that, especially if you live with them. And a lot of the time they gave me money. They fell into my stories of, I need money for this, or I need money for that. And they would give me money, and they would accept my excuses. And they never made it hard for me to use.
Mm-hmm.
I always had a warm bed. I always had a warm meal. Everything was okay. They didn't really ruffle any feathers. They didn't make it difficult for me to use. I was so comfortable to be in the house using. I could have stayed there for as long as I wanted. And they really didn't say much, except for that one time that they bombarded me with this
Right.
half an attempt on an intervention.
Yeah. So it's almost like they couldn't take it for another second.
Yeah, they exploded. They waited till the last minute, and they just topped out. And they didn't really they didn't do it very organized, and they didn't really think about it before they did it. They didn't even have a place to send me. They just like, you're leaving right now.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, where am I going? And
Okay.
yeah, it's funny, because when it's a loved one, or it's somebody that you're dealing with closely, the last thing you want to think is that they're a full-blown addict, or you don't think they're that bad, or you don't want to put them in a bad position, because you want to comfort them. And you think by loving them and showing them all your love and giving them your support, that you're actually helping them. But what you're doing is, all you're doing is helping them use, and you're enabling them to become an addict and stay an addict.
Right.
And an addict in a comfortable position is never going to move.
Very good point. An addict in a comfortable position is never going to move. And so, the discomfort and some of the pain and the suffering, and making it a little bit more difficult to get high, because it's like, which pain is worse? At some point, there's this tipping point where the pain of getting high is now it's not worth it anymore, compared to the pain of making a change.
Yeah, everybody makes their decisions, but Tony Robbins speaks about this a lot, the pain and pleasure aspect. When they associate more pain with something than pleasure, they're going to stop doing it. And it's however they switch their paradigm to look at it and perceive a situation is how they're really going to respond to that experience or that situation. So if they're using in a house and they find more pleasure in using and hanging out in the house, then the pain of quitting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about, and this is what seems so baffling about it, right? So if you go back to your 5-year stretch of just being in the vicious cycle, right, you would think, as an outsider looking in, that he's in so much pain, he should be stopping, right? Like, there's no way anybody that's sane, rational, reasonable, logical would be continuing down that road in that pain.
Well, you're exactly right. You just hit it on the nose. Anybody that's sane, logical, level-headed, all those adjectives that you used, is exactly what you're not when you're an addict. You're just not. It's almost like it's like a parasite, and you're just the host. And you're just a slave to your addiction. It makes your decisions. It just feeds off of you, and it's pretty much running the show when you're in active addiction. So you're not in your right mind. You're not sane. You're not healthy. You're not any of those things that you just listed.
Right. So, so your family, they come storming in. You grab your safe. You go to your friend's house, and you manage to do what you're able to do, manipulate her, and you get in there. And then what happens next?
So she said I could stay there for as long as I want. And that night she cooked me a bowl of macaroni and cheese, and everybody fell asleep. Everybody woke up in the morning. Not me. I didn't wake up. But everybody else woke up to me face first in my vomit, blue, completely unresponsive. And they called the ambulance. and rushed me to the hospital. In the hospital, my heart stopped. In the ambulance, my heart stopped. When I got to the hospital, they put me in the ICU, and I spent the next 3 weeks completely unresponsive, fighting for my life.
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Okay.
No pain response, no nothing. I had multi-organ failure, my liver, my kidneys, my lungs. My blood pressure was like unconceivably low. I had 20-30% oxygen in my brain. I had 108 fever. My brain was frying. I had sepsis of the blood. My blood was becoming toxic to my body because my liver and kidneys were not filtering my blood properly. And I developed gangrene. All my limbs swelled up with fluids, and I developed edema. I was supposed to lose all 4 of my limbs. In fact, I died 2 other times in that hospital while I was in a coma. On the third time, they read my last rites, and they'd actually baptized me and read my last rites, and nothing short of a miracle. With no warning at all, I just woke up. And this was the biggest realization of my life, because when I woke up, I didn't know where I was, but I woke up to my mother, my father, my little brother, my family all looking at me crying. And I realized that I did this. And it was the first time in my active addiction that I realized that my actions have serious effects and consequences on the people around me that I loved. Now, I might not have loved myself all that much at that time, but I still loved my family, my mother, my father, all these people. And when I seen what I did to them, and I had that moment of clarity, it was the worst feeling of my entire life. And I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. It was just, it's going to haunt me for the rest of my life. And that was the decision that I decided, that if I survived this, I was going to turn things around and make a difference in my life. And it wasn't an easy task, because even when I woke up, I'd hear them nonstop saying to the doctors would tell my parents, he's not going to make it through the night. Going to say your goodbyes. He's still not going to make it. If he decides to make it, if he pulls through, he's never going to be the son you once knew. He's going to be a complete vegetable. He's going to lose all 4 of his limbs. You're going to have to change him. You're going to have to feed him. He's going to live in his bed. He's not going to be able to speak. He might not even be able to breathe on his own. He's like, you really want that life? And my family were kind of delusional at the time. The doctors thought they were crazy, because they're like, you don't know my son. He's strong. He's going to get through this. And they were looking at them like they were out of their minds. And nothing short of a miracle. I have all my brain function. Unfortunately, at one point, the doctor looked at me. He said, I have some good news and bad news. The good news is, I think you're going to make it. The bad news is, we're going to have to take your leg. My souvenir that I get to put on every morning to remind me of the poor decisions and mistakes that I've made throughout my life.
So a prosthetic limb right at the knee?
Yeah, it's a below the knee prosthetic limb, and I have irreparable nerve damage and neuropathy throughout my other three limbs. I actually had drop wrist in my right hand, and they told me that I was never going to be able to move my hand again. And at that point, I had a decision. I could either turn it over and wallowed in self-pity. Poor me, my life's never going to be the same. I'm going to have people take care of me for the rest of my life, or use all this adversity and all of this challenge ahead of me as like rocket fuel to ignite a passion and a motivation and an inspiration inside of me like I've never seen before. And I took the latter, and I decided to make it a game on learning how to do these things again. I had to learn how to breathe on my own, because I used to take me off with the breathing machine in the middle of the night and learn how to breathe again, because I had terrible pneumonia and aspiration. When I aspirated, I had terrible pneumonia, double pneumonia, and I wasn't able to breathe on my own. So I'd have to learn how to breathe on my own again. It was like being waterboarded throughout the night. It was the most torturous thing that I've ever experienced. And I wasn't able to eat or drink anything for 3 of the 4 months that I was in the hospital. I remember the first time that I had a sip of Gatorade. I like snuck a little sponge of it in the hospital. The face that I had, I should have did a Gatorade commercial, because I would have made $1 million on the expression. I had an orgasm just a taste of
Gatorade.
Taste of the Gatorade, and it was an amazing experience. But there was so much adversities that I went through. I had to learn how to move my hand again. I had to learn how to walk again. I was 120 pounds soaking wet when I was in the hospital. I'm 215 pounds now, so puts it all in perspective. But although I went through all of these physical ailments and adversities and everything, I think the hardest was the emotional and social aspect of the recovery. And I think everybody that goes through addiction whether you have a family member that's dealing with it, if you have a family member that's coming out of a rehab facility or an intensive program or whatever the case may be, it's super challenging for them to reassimilate into society because all you know is addiction. I mean, every friend that I had that was worth being friends with, I pushed away through addiction.
Mm.
The only people I had left were my dealers and the people I got high with and people that I didn't really want to be around when I was sober. So when I got out of the hospital, I didn't really have anybody. I had no social skills. I lost my job. I lost my girlfriend. I lost my career. I lost my apartment. I lost everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to like rebuild myself from scratch. It's almost like reinventing yourself when all of your prime years of whatever you remember were all about addiction, all about using,
Right.
all about manipulating, all about figuring out the next way to get your next high or what to do. Like I remember since I was 13 years old, what do you want to do? Turned into, you want to go smoke a blunt. We'd all hang out and smoke marijuana together, and that was hanging out. You know, to change from that for doing that for almost 14 years and coming out and having to use my brain to figure out what I wanted to do on a Friday or Saturday night, opposed to using drugs, was super challenging because it was an unknown navigation through an ocean that I didn't know.
And definitely speaking to the challenges of early recovery and how, when you came out of the hospital, how long were you in the hospital?
I was in the hospital for 4 months.
Okay. Yeah. So that's interesting because, you know, as difficult, obviously, as your recovery experience was, right? It's kind of like, you know, just when you think about taking the person from the environment that they were in, putting them into treatment, you know, somewhere. Obviously, again, yours was extreme, right? But like the fact that you had 4 months away from opiates, of like the substances to the degree that you were doing them.
Well, let me backtrack that because I was going through so many different surgeries. They had me on Dilaudid in the hospital.
Okay.
So I was on Dilaudid up until about the last month of while I was in the hospital. And
Gotcha.
then the last month they had me on methadone in the hospital.
Right.
And they tried to put me on Suboxone when I got out of the hospital. And I did not want to take that. I just wanted to do it. So I went home and I actually withdrew cold turkey in my house with the support of my family taking care of me.
Gotcha.
And that's how I went about my recovery. But I was done the second I woke up from the coma. I just was still using drugs because they were doing massive surgeries on me. I mean, I had an abscess in my glute. They had to suck out all the muscle. I had lung surgery. I had an amputated leg. I mean, it was just so many things. They couldn't even take me off of painkillers while I was in the hospital. But as soon as I got home from the hospital, I made the decision to just stop taking them. And that was an extremely challenging obstacle.
Yeah. So driven by the emotional pain that you mentioned when you came out of the coma and you saw your family there, that was kind of the driving force throughout.
100%.
Okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, not a lot of people don't have that kind of experience, you know, to move them forward.
Well, that's why rehabilitation centers and going through interventions is so powerful, because it gives them that opportunity of clarity, that window of sobriety, that they can actually get clean. You know, that's a huge component. Is like when the person that's going through addiction doesn't want to make the decision themselves to get clean, you do an intervention and you send them away and you get them out of their environment, their people, places, and things that they're dealing with. Get them out of their environment for 30 days. Maybe they get some mental clarity, and then you put them into some kind of intensive outpatient program, or hire a recovery coach, or get them to AA meetings or NA meetings and plug them into a support system. Because, you know, although the intervention and the rehab is awesome, it's still just the first step.
Right.
You can get them clean, but when they go back into the same environment, they're very likely to go back if they don't get plugged into the proper community, the proper support system, whether it be counseling, coaching, AA groups are amazing, 12-step programs, whatever it may be, get them clean. But people go to the path of least resistance. So if you take a broken person and you get them clean, now they still have a hole in their chest. Now you put them back into the life, into environment, into the same places, people and friends that are around, and they have a stressful day. they're going to fall into old patterns, old grooves of their life that they're used to. They do it subconsciously without even thinking. Like, you ever be driving and you're driving, you're thinking, and all of a sudden you're home and you don't even realize how you got there?
Yeah.
Because we have such muscle memory of things that we've done over and over and over again. That's the same thing with addiction. People get stressed out. They have a bad day. Their first go-to is, let me go get a bag. And before they know it, they're using. So we have to break these patterns and really rewire their brain for success.
The exciting thing is that the brain does, in fact, rewire. That healing can happen in the brain. And so, I mean, talk about that. I mean, we're going back now. I mean, here we are in 2019. So 6 or 7 years ago is when you left the hospital.
Yes.
How are things going now?
Things are going amazing. I couldn't even imagine that I would have accomplished the things that I've done so far. It's absolutely amazing. My life is it's not about me anymore. It's about giving back and helping other people. I started speaking to kids in schools about addiction.
Yeah.
And I realized how powerful it was to help another person and talk in front of huge crowds and really impact people and touch people in their hearts and their souls. And it was just such a rewarding thing that I decided that I wanted to do this for a living. And I went back to school in college. I wanted to go become a doctor, but I didn't want to go through all the schooling. So I wanted to do a PA and an NP. And then I realized that my true passion is transforming people's lives from broken to badass, like going from the depths of the darkest places and bringing them to a life that they love to live.
Yeah.
So I just got trained in like so many things as a public speaker, as an interventionist, as a family coach, or as a recovery coach. And I learned and as a transformational coach with John Maxwell, and I went to Tony Robbins events, seminars. I read over 100 self-development books. I never read a book in my life when I was on drugs. I read literally over 100 self-development books in the last few years. I went to seminars with Tony Robbins, John Maxwell, Les Brown, Mary Morrissey, anything that I can go to. I'm going to one next week, actually. And I just got addicted to improving myself. I got into the gym. I started working out. I started reading books. I started going to seminars. And I realized that the cure to depression is selfless service to other people. I wanted to create my life around this. So I've been coaching people and I've been speaking at events. And I even written a book. I'm actually writing my second book. I'm in the process of the editing process. It's complete. I just got to go through the editing process right now.
Awesome.
And I'm really excited about that. Should be out in about 3 months. And I'm really looking forward to that. But these are things that I never in a million years would have thought I could accomplish as an addict.
Sure.
I'm literally half the man I used to be physically. I lost my leg. I have all these nerve damage, all these issues, my neck, my back. But I'm 10 times the man integrity-wise that I ever was or ever would have been if I would have continued to use drugs.
Yeah. And I mean, clearly you're passionate about it. And that's how I felt about you when we first met. I just knew that this was something that you were seriously serious about, and that you were really, when you mentioned all of those different things and just reading all of those books, I kind of went through the same kind of period of just wanting to consume as much information and tactics and strategy, like everything I could in order to be helpful, like how can I just a little bit more edge for what to say in a moment when, you don't know what's going to come at you, but you want to just say the thing that's going to make the difference.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's really been, a joyful experience for me. And I can see, it's the same for you as well. Also, just to kind of like mention the intervention piece. So I know that you've trained in interventions also, and that you've done a few. In your experience now, from what you've seen, like what's your take on the family role? From what kind of like traditionally what we understood when it comes to addiction, or how it was looked at, like, as soon as the person has had enough pain, right? Which would be, as soon as it's bad enough, he's going to go and do something about it. And instead, kind of learning about what the family role is like. What's that been like for you?
So anytime I do an intervention, I interview all the family members, the people that are going to be a part of the intervention, to figure out what roles these people play in this person's life. Whether they might be a buffer, they might be the person that gets in between the conflict, or they may be the person that's in charge, that's always the tyrant that's going to be really like taking control of the situation, or the enabler. or the scapegoat. I try to figure out the pawns and the pieces of the game that we're playing, and I coach them accordingly. And a huge part is to set up the room properly so we can get the most efficiency out of the conversation that we're having. And their biggest role that they need to take is towing the line. If we come up with an ultimatum, if we come up with a game plan, we all have to have a unified line.
Right.
It has to be a solid line. There can't be 4 people on board and then the one person be like, well, it's okay if he does that, because it's not going to work. Yeah. The addict will immediately see that and boom, latch onto that person, and that's their way out. We have to have a strong, unified front, and we have to find the leverage that creates more pain in this person's life than pleasure, so we can switch the paradigm for them to decide to, because you can only bring a horse to water. You can't make them drink. You can't like chloroform the person that's in addiction and drag them into a rehab facility. They have to willingly go.
Right.
So you have to find some kind of leverage that makes it make sense to them.
Yeah. And the misconception about intervention might be that that's something that's going on. We're not talking about like a TV version of intervention. We're talking about family communication, working together. And when we talk about ultimatums too, we're not talking about like forcing a family member into something they're uncomfortable with, right? It's that everybody is clear and okay with, all right, this is where I can hold the line.
Yeah.
This is where I'm comfortable holding the line. This is the level of kind of the leverage that we have here. And okay, just as long as you hold your line, and whoever, mom, dad, whether it's financial or emotional, whatever kind of leverage we have, but to move that person in the direction of saying, it's going to be more painful for me to continue getting high or getting drunk than to just accept the unknown. That's really what it is, right? It's just a fear of, I don't know what it's going to look like on the other side. Can I the horse to water kind of thing. Can I trust this water? I know what I've been doing is bad, but what's that going to do to me? I don't know. Like, I just don't know what it's going to look like on the other side. But once you get there, that's when the experience of recovery, it's like anybody I've ever spoken to that's in recovery has always said, I wanted to stop all the time. I just didn't know how to, or I couldn't, or I'd say I'm done, but then I'd start again that night or later that week or whatever, So where can people find you if they're looking for you?
Well, you can find me at truewarriorsuccess.com. I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook as Kevin Parker, or on True One-Legged Warrior on Instagram, but you can just look up my name. I'm coming out with a book, The True Warrior Within, Transforming Challenges into a Life of Empowerment. Should be coming out in about three months.
Great. And so you'll be able to get that from the truewarriorsuccess.com website.
Yes, it'll be on the website. It'll be on Amazon. It'll be on Kindle. It'll be on all the different platforms that there are.
All right, great. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, Kevin, and we will certainly connect in the future. I wish you all the best in all of your endeavors, and I'm excited to see the growth that you're going to continue to have, man. You're really doing a great job out there, and I appreciate you coming on.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.